Welcome back. My name is Brian. In today's video I'm going to introduce you to both the design process that went into making a couple shelves that mount flush to the wall, as well as the building of these shelves. This first shelf that I'm showing you only has 3 pieces, and we're going to take a look at the design for this as well as how it was made. So the shelf, as you can see here, has a taper. This is rounded over on the shelf as well, and on the back we have no hardware at all, just keyhole hanging hardware. And I'm here to tell you that this is not what I did in the beginning, and this is part of the iterative design. I initially made shelf supports that look like this, and then on the back side of them I mortised in some metal hanging hardware. And after doing that, I realized that this was a very slow and tedious process, and I did not want to do that if I was going to make a lot of these shelves. Here you can see the hardware that I didn't like, but once this hardware is installed, I ended up with a little bit of chipping because there's not much room beyond the width of this, and I also ended up with a small crack. When I was trying to make this corner, my chisel, I went a little too far up and it just ended up with a crack along there. I went and found a keyhole bit and then decided to do this, as you will see here. So let's take a look at the design in a little more detail. So I wanted to talk about the design. I wanted a simple shelf that required either very little or no hardware. And so what I did was I made these shelf supports that are vertical that mount to the wall, and here we're disassembling our shelf, and these are our shelf supports. You can see that they have a slot in them, and that slot is made to interlock with this on the bottom of our shelf. So I'll rotate this in a couple different directions so you can kind of get the idea of what's happening here. But what you will see is that this has a very small thickness, and that's made so that whenever I put this in, this will slide on there, and I could either glue that in or come up with some sort of retention system on the back of that to have that hold, in the future. I'm simply just gluing these in, but I'd require no hardware for this to work. One of the key aspects of the design in order to make this work is that the width of this slot needs to be almost exactly the width of this vertical support. If it's not, then this won't fit in there correctly. Similarly, the width of this slot needs to be or match the width of this right here, that part that it interlocks. So we need to get that correct in our design and in our fabrication. This was originally a CNC project, but as you will see in the CNC footage that follows, we broke one of the ends on one of the pieces, and so I decided this would be a great opportunity to show how to cut these by hand. So what I want you to notice is that I've taken one of my parts and I've laid out the geometry onto the other part. I've scribed it in with a marking knife, but I've also traced this with a pencil so that you can see it. Our strategy is going to use a crosscut saw to cut this length, along this length right here. But when we get into this corner, we're not going to be able to cut that with the crosscut saw. So we'll cut these 2 lines with the crosscut saw, and then when we get down here in the corner, we'll use a coping saw. instead of cutting out this curve exactly, what I'm going to do is cut a bunch of tangent lines that get pretty close to the shape of the object, and then I'm going to just sand the rest of that. This ends up being very quick. The thing you want to check with your test cut is you want to make sure that your wall anchor screw will go in and slide up freely. So let's return to the shelf and talk about our design for a moment. So what we want again is we want our shelf support to interlock with our shelf. And so what we have here is that we need to make this joinery, and this is a stopped dado that we need to make, and also we need to cut this down to a particular depth. And we're going to show you how to do this with some hand tools. And in addition to that, what we have is that we have tapered along this bottom, this shelf, and rounded over the top. In full confession, my initial pieces were cut with the CNC machine. I also wanted to show you how to do this by hand. To demonstrate how to cut this shelf, what we're going to do is we're going to cut the geometry on just half the shelf on this scrap piece. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to start by removing this section here, which mimics the section down here, and then we're going to cut a stopped dado along this section right here, which is what's in here, and then finally we'll cut an angle along with a curve right here. thing on the router plane. You can set the depth of the router plane to whatever you would like by simply using this adjustment knob. You can dial that in and have that be as deep as our part here. Here I didn't go all the way as deep as our original part, but I was just demonstrating how to use the router plane in the final step of cleaning that up. With this part cut out, we can now check our fit. It looks like it fits pretty well. Thank you for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to hit that like button down below, and I'll see you in a future video.